Sometimes one of my favorite things to do with my roommate is just to talk about random NFL players, random college players, or people you forgot even existed. For example, guys like Chris Ivory, Gary Barnidge, or Jonas Gray. Names like that. Well, the guy who I randomly thought about was Tyler Thigpen. I remember playing with him in Madden back in the day, and I wondered to myself, who is this guy, what is he up to now, and what was his story? Well, as I dug into it, he actually had a pretty crazy story. He's actually the QB who helped to get the Coastal Carolina football program on the map, actually started a season in the NFL, and is a Hall of Famer in his local area. When I think of Coastal Carolina quarterbacks, I think of Grayson McCall, but nearly 20 years ago, Tyler Thigpen was the guy who got the program going. In today's video, we're going to talk about the story behind one of the most random players in the NFL. We're going to go through his crazy story at Coastal Carolina, how he landed a 7-year career in the NFL, and whatever happened to the dude. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and please drop a random NFL player from any time down in the comment section below, and we'll see if you can get selected to be the next video topic. Now let's go ahead and get started and talk about what happened to Tyler Thigpen. So going back in time, Thigpen grew up in Winsboro, South Carolina, and he played quarterback with his local Little League team and became a star there. Eventually, when he got to high school, football was pretty much everything to him, but his parents warned him that it wouldn't last forever. He said, quote, "It was really all I knew from my life. My parents instilled in me to get an education, and I knew that football was going to be over one day. Education was obviously important to him, but he did have a football career to look after at first. After starting both his sophomore and junior year at Fairfield Central High School, he was injured during a preseason game, which would cause him to miss the first 2 games of his senior season. As a result of the team's performance in those first few games, their head coach decided to give his starting spot to the backup. The classic case of that. Tyler said, quote, "I didn't let it get me down, and I might have held my head down at home, but you know what? I made the most of that opportunity. I'll tell you right now, it was probably the best year of football of my life." The coach had asked him to make an unusual sacrifice, as he recognized the backup Ryan Sharp could handle the quarterback duties better. He knew how special Tyler was, so he asked him to play both receiver, running back, tight end, and punter. He ended up doing that because he wanted to get on the field. As a senior, he had great numbers, as he was an all-state tight end, and even averaged 43.2 yards per punt. While it was great for winning and great for him, it wasn't great for college scouts. His Coastal Carolina coach said, quote, "If that hadn't happened, we might not have gotten him. He was athletic and had great hands, so I told him if it didn't work out for him at quarterback, he might end up being a possession receiver in the NFL." Because of that season, Coastal Carolina head coach David Bennett got him to sign as a quarterback, and he'd actually become the first quarterback in school history. Coach Bennett said, quote, "Tyler is probably one of the best kept secrets in South Carolina. He's a great athlete who can play a lot of places, and we are going to start him at quarterback, but he can also punt." Coastal Carolina was now in the early stages of their football program, and him and a couple of other players would have a huge impact during their time there. He played alongside former NFL receiver Jerome Simpson and running back Mike Tolbert. All 3 of them were Chanticleers, and these guys would lead the program to major victories against number 1 James Madison in 2005 and number 3 Furman in 2006. As a sophomore, he'd end up making 7 starts, throwing for 1,000 yards with 8 touchdowns. He also ran for a score on the ground. In 2005 as a junior, he would start 11 games, throwing for 1,500 yards and 11 touchdowns with 6 picks. He also ran for nearly 500 yards and 4 scores on the ground, and led them to a conference championship game. Just before the start of his final season at Coastal Carolina, Thigpen was just enjoying his time there and was not really thinking about football as a career, but his coaches came up to him and told him he had the ability to play at the next level. As we all know, quarterback scouting worked a little bit differently then, but he said he really locked in before his senior year, and he said, quote, "I wish I would have taken everything as seriously as I did my senior season. He truly committed to watching film, working out, and grabbing teammates after practice. In short, it's when he became a leader and took his game to the next step." In 2006, he threw for 3,296 yards with 29 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. He also ran for 600 yards and 5 scores on the ground and led them to the FCS playoffs. He was named the Big South Conference Player of the Year and became the first player in school history to earn consensus All-American honors. He finished the season with 5+ 300-yard games, and in total at Coastal, he was crazy. He played in 41 games, throwing for nearly 7,000 yards with 53 touchdowns and also 1,600 yards and 13 scores on the ground. He was an absolute legend in Myrtle Beach, and he took a startup program at Coastal and won 30 games there. Now though, he was going to get a chance to play in the NFL. While later on he would become the first player from Coastal and the Big South to ever be selected in the NFL draft, he first had a couple of great stories. When he was a decent prospect at the time, his encounter with Philadelphia Eagles coach Pat Shermer was awesome. Shermer went out to watch him throw, and after a 45-minute session, Shermer had an odd request for Tyler. He said, quote, "I want to ask you a favor. I'm going to give you one chance to stand at midfield and try and hit the crossbar. Shermer pointed to the back end zone 60 yards away. Thigpen nodded, took a 3-step run, and threw a dart that hit dead center. Wow, Shermer said. You think you can do it again? Thigpen's response was priceless. He said, quote, "You said I only got one chance." From there, the workout was over, and I thought that was pretty interesting. He would end up getting drafted by the Minnesota Vikings in the 7th round, but his time as a Viking was not really meant to be. Minnesota would place him on waivers and put him on the practice squad. He said, quote, "I was familiar with the coaches and the whole coaching staff, but when I went on waivers, Kansas City put a claim in, and I found out at 4 in the afternoon while I was walking through a Best Buy trying to get a PlayStation." That was his story of how he ended up in Kansas City, and he became the 3rd-string quarterback there. He'd make his debut on December 12th of 2007 against the Chargers, and he filled in for Brock Heward, who was injured late in the game. Thigpen went 2 of 6 for 41 yards, and they lost 24-10. That was it for him in 2007 because he tore his MCL in practice and was no longer available. In 2008, he was stuck behind both Damon Heward and Brody Croyle, but became the starter mid-season. He actually ended up having a decent fall, as he threw for 2,600 yards with 18 touchdowns. That was more than rookies Matt Ryan and Joe Flacco, but the Chiefs did blow 5 fourth-quarter leads and went 1-10 in games he started. That didn't look good on him. The unfortunate part, though, is he couldn't close games. As Edwards said, quote, "He couldn't close games. But we also had 20 first-year players on the team, 11 of them were starters, so we were so young on both sides of the ball, and nobody could help anybody." While Thigpen was a great worker and the team vouched for him to stay, the Chiefs decided to release Heward, bring in Matt Castle from New England, and Thigpen was once again the 3rd stringer. Kansas City would eventually trade him to the Miami Dolphins, which is where people like me remember him. He saw limited time as a 3rd-string quarterback behind Chad Pennington and Chad Henne, and that would happen in 2008 and 2009. In November 2010, though, Thigpen would get his chance. Dolphins fans were wondering who the heck this guy was, as he would make his first start for them on a Thursday night game against the Chicago Bears. In that game, he ended up going 17 of 29 for 187 yards and didn't throw a touchdown but had an interception. He got shut out 16-0, and it wasn't the greatest game, but he did at least finish the year with an okay game, as against the Patriots, he had 169 yards and a touchdown in that loss. After that, Thigpen would sort of wash out, as he went to Buffalo in 2011 and was a backup for the Bills for 2 years, and then in May of 2014, he would sign with the Cleveland Browns and was released by August. After he retired, Thigpen had this to say, quote, "It's not something I wanted to see come to an end, but I always knew there'd be a life after football. Just knowing and being able to face reality, the NFL is not for long, and to play as long as I did, I'll cherish those memories forever. I wouldn't trade them for anything." In total, Thigpen would end up playing 6 seasons in the NFL, as he would compile a 1-11 record, throw for 3,000 yards, had 21 touchdowns, and 18 interceptions. So in the nearly 10 years since he last played an NFL game, what is Tyler Thigpen up to now? Well, he's apparently a real estate agent. You can find his page when you do a quick Google search, and it looks like he has completely moved on to that stage of life and is now helping people find homes. Truly, this guy was pretty insane. He was the guy who helped a startup program get put on the map. He became the first player from his conference to ever be drafted in the NFL. He started most of his season with the Kansas City Chiefs, played for multiple different teams, and really did the unthinkable. No one expected this guy coming out of high school to make it, and for a guy who I thought was just a random no-name, he actually has a pretty great story, and this was a very interesting video to make. But what do you guys think? What do you think of his story? And who's another random NFL player I should do a feature on next? Before you go, don't forget to leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen, including my video talking about the 2017 draft class for the Cleveland Browns. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.